This video is going to be my first preview of the Ravens-Bills matchup in Week 4 on Sunday Night Football in Baltimore. The Bills come in with a 3-0 record, scoring at least 31 points in every game, averaging an NFL best 31 points per game. They got wins over the Arizona Cardinals, the Dolphins, and the winless Jacksonville Jaguars. I do want to mention those teams are a combined 2-7 overall. It's early in the season, but Miami's only win is over the Jaguars. So there is something to be said about their strength of schedule. More on that later. The film of the Bills, in terms of their offense, shows a very efficient, versatile offense that gets the ball to a lot of players. They're fourth in the league in yards per play at 6.1 yards per play. As an aside, the Ravens are first at 6.6. But Buffalo has 8 different players who have scored touchdowns. I think there's something to be said for that in terms of long-term effectiveness and sustainability, regardless of what their early season schedule looks like. One player that we'll focus on in this preview, Khalil Shakir, hopefully I'm saying his last name right, 14 of 14 catches to targets. He's got 2 touchdowns. At this point in time, you have to say he is the position player who is leading a deep offense in terms of receivers and tight ends. They're averaging over 11.5 yards per catch. The Ravens defense has quite obviously been very schizophrenic, dominant at times, and then the total other end of the spectrum at others. Let's dive into the numbers a little bit so I can kind of explain that to you if you weren't already aware. In their first halves the last 2 weeks, so first half against the Raiders at home in Week 2, and then first half on the road against the Cowboys in Week 3. We're going to combine those 2 halves into one 60-minute game. They would allow 233 yards over those 60 minutes, 58 plays, just over 4 yards per play. Additional to that, only 12 points allowed in those 4 quarters, and they've forced 2 turnovers, 1 interception and 1 fumble recovery. Of course, the other end of the spectrum, they've allowed 39 combined points in the second halves of those 2 games against the Raiders and the Cowboys. And I personally don't think those 2 teams are very complete. If you compare the Raiders, Cowboys, and the Bills, at this point in time, I think you have to admit that the Bills are more complete. They're more dangerous. They have a more wider variety of weapons. The Raiders' passing game weapons, quite obvious. Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, who I don't think is playing this week, by the way. And then the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb is their main guy. This team, Buffalo, has so many guys that have scored touchdowns, so many guys that make big plays. They got a pair of big receivers along with a couple of good tight ends. Now, from a Ravens defensive standpoint, they've only given up 4 passing touchdowns. And that doesn't sound too bad. But it doesn't sound too bad when you think about the Commanders have given up 9. The Rams and Panthers have given up 7 each. I think 5 other teams have given up 6. But the Ravens have given up the most passing yards in the league. It's 946 yards through 3 games. So the only team allowing 300 passing yards per game in the NFL. Now, they do have 10 sacks at this point. I think you have to mention that, or you have to give some recognition to that. But 8.1 yards per attempt for the offense. That's the 4th worst from a pass defense perspective. We have 3 defensive pass interference penalties. A couple of penalties, actually at least 2, maybe 3 on the defense that are absolute bullshit. The Owe tackle last week, or hit on Dak Prescott, was awful. The NFL won't ever admit that. They don't do what the NBA does and kind of reorganize thoughts on it and at least admit where they made a mistake. And then the Matty BK face mask in Week 2 against the Raiders was ridiculous. We're going to let some big plays flow through here to illustrate big plays from the second half flow through here so you can see the nature of some of these plays. Downfield passing in many situations, even though that was a first and goal from the 1 touchdown where Marlon Humphrey let his eyes betray him. Big plays in the pass game in the second half. We would be remiss if we didn't mention the penalty differential. And this is not meant to attribute all of the collapses to penalties, but a 31-15 differential in penalties, that's not sustainable for a team that wants to win 10-plus football games. I'm talking about, from a Ravens standpoint, taking ownership of some of the penalties and trying to find a way to minimize them or make them disappear altogether. The Cowboys lead the league with 32 penalties. The Ravens are second with 31. But I believe we had 2 or 3 that were declined or offsetting so far this year. 1 against the Chiefs, 1 against the Raiders, and then 1 in our game against the Cowboys, meaning either an offsetting penalty or one that was declined. Regardless of what the percent responsibility is. The Ravens' coverage choices, from a coaching standpoint, how the Ravens players are performing out on the field, penalties, the second half trends have to stop. Multiple factors, like I said. We do have 10 sacks, and I think it is important to mention that even though we have 10 sacks, there have been times where the pass rush seems to slow down. The pass rush seems to disappear or become less effective. And I think that we have to mention that could be one of the reasons or one of the factors why the Ravens this week picked up Yannick Ngakoue. He's a dedicated pass rush guy, doesn't have a relative strength as a run defender, in my opinion. I think we saw that in his first time here in Baltimore, and you see that from the film since he left. 2021 with the Raiders, 2022 with the Colts, and then 2023 with the Bears. Film from all three of those seasons shows a guy that is not great at the point of attack if you're running at him. Now, if you're running away from him and he's able to chase things down from behind, that's a different story. Because a guy who's got great burst, a guy who can chase things down from the backside, particularly when he's unblocked. I do think that we should prepare ourselves as Ravens fans for him to be active sooner rather than later. Not this week necessarily against the Bills, but you're talking about a guy who has 8+ sacks in every season in the NFL, dating back to his rookie year of 2017. Think about that yourself. Go check that out to confirm that statistic, number one. And then number two, go see what other players have posted those type of numbers in that same time frame. 69 career sacks. He did miss 4 games in 2023, which was the only season he didn't register 8+ sacks. Why am I mentioning that to you? Well, a year ago, almost at this time, when Kyle Van Noy was signed, there was discussion, commentary, and poor, negative, and inaccurate evaluations by a lot of Ravens fans about Kyle Van Noy's signing. He wouldn't move the needle. I hate that saying anyway. The same things were said in many ways about Jadeveon Clowney when he was signed in training camp, and we see how those two things turned out. We don't know how the Yannick Ngakoue signing is going to turn out, but I do know this, and it doesn't take long in watching his film. He's a better, more effective, and far more accomplished pass rusher than Tavius Robinson and David Ojabo at this point. That's a fact if you watch the film. Those two guys currently get snaps on the field for us. Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Oweh, along with Madubuike, have been our most consistent guys in terms of generating pressure. Yannick Ngakoue is probably going to get on the field sooner rather than later, number one. Number two, and be put on the field in pass rush situations when the Ravens have a lead in the second half. I think he was signed to help address one of our most obvious weaknesses, which is pass rush depth in the second half. Among the many issues that the Ravens defense has put out there on film in the second half, too many free releases. I think that's obvious. Just too much space afforded to the receivers from a vertical stem standpoint. They'll push off in a vertical stem. DBs, whether it's corners or safeties, will get depth, and then too much space on a curl, comeback, in-breaking route for receivers and tight ends. Also, I think predictable four-man rushes. I do like the dime looks that Zach Orr is using. I think he needs to be more unpredictable and versatile with which 4 players are going to rush. Mike McDonald did a lot of that last year, bringing the outside linebacker, dropping out someone else on the other side at times, bringing a nickel from one side, inside linebacker from the other, and maybe dropping out 2 outside linebackers. But point is, being more unpredictable with safe rushes. Still rushing 4, not committing too many players to the rush portion of that rush to coverage dynamic, but making it unpredictable for the offensive line and the quarterback. Now, there's certain things you can and can't do against Josh Allen. In some ways, he's similar to Lamar in that if you play man-free and rush 4, I think you're in real trouble, and I'll show some film of that here in a minute. The dime looks that Zach Orr has used so far, I like those looks. I wish he would tag it with a little bit faster defensive line, basically get one of the defensive tackles off the field, in my opinion. I don't think on 3rd and 8, with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, you need 2 defensive tackles on the field to try to get after the quarterback if you're going to stay safe and bring a 4-man rush, especially if it's an organic 4-man rush. And I think those two things are related. So we'll get to the film here. Obviously, I'll only use one play to make this point. You have to account for the threat of Josh Allen scrambling and moving around. He's extremely difficult to tackle and corral and control. I don't know what he's pointing at after the play here. It looks like he's pointing for a first down, perhaps a penalty, but he's able to escape havoc or trouble against the Cardinals, who aren't necessarily a great defense, in my opinion, either. You have multiple players lined up almost a yard off the line of scrimmage from a defensive tackle standpoint. But starting point number one, have to decide what you're going to do with Josh Allen. Are you going to try to sack him? I don't know what the return is on that investment. Almost similar to Mahomes in some way, except Allen is bigger and faster and stronger and can just break tackles at times. Mahomes and him have escapability. So one of the things they're doing a lot of is they're creating space with design plays that I think that is simple. Don't get me wrong. It's an empty concept. 3 receivers to the downside of the field. This is Hollins, who I believe played for the Raiders previously. He's a big-bodied receiver. When you combine him with Keon Coleman, you've got 2 big threats. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling is on this team as well, but those 2 guys seem to be playing more than him. This is a 3rd and 10. In the third quarter against Arizona, week 1, there was a time in this game where they're down 17-3. At this point, it's 17-16. This touchdown helps them take the lead for good. They ended up winning, I think, 31-28. Great throw by Allen. The accuracy, the arm strength, all of the throws are there. The margin for error, in my opinion, is smaller than what it has been the last 2 weeks. Trying to make things look the same at times. This is a little running back motion from one side to the other. Trying to sift out or draw the coverage. You have to mention Khalil Shakir, who, like I said, 14 catches on 14 targets. Little hitch screen to him up top. Again, they're up 23-13 at this point against Arizona. They're running it to the trips where you have Hollins and Coleman out here as potential blockers. Additional to that, left tackle getting out in space, getting a block out in front, and Shakir, who seems to have real shifty and an agile nature about him, is able to get into the end zone for an 11-yard touchdown to extend the lead. Really nicely designed play, if you ask me. I'm not sure why teams are allowed. Years ago, used to be a called a penalty if you had 2 guys moving at any point in time. But in any case, Cook is going to go across the formation, and then it's a pick, rub, shield concept, whatever you want to call it. It's really nicely designed. Cheap, if you want to. If you're a defensive coach, I would call it cheap because I'm a defensive coach. But the design of it is great. They've determined that this linebacker, number 11, is going to be on Cook, and then obviously this DB who's chasing is going to be guard number 1. It's a 4th and 3 in week 2. The Dolphins obviously lost their quarterback in this game, made it difficult for them to get anything accomplished offensively, but you can see a double pick shield here by the outside receivers. Once number 1 motioned away, you had 2 receivers remaining in the bunch, and those guys' job, their assignment, is to pick the defender that's responsible for Cook. So he's running across the face of Josh Allen. The Ravens actually run this as well. 3 times in the Chiefs game, we had the running back lined up to one side of the quarterback, and then he released actually to the other side of the formation. The difference is Todd Monken and the Ravens do this to the boundary, but you can see the pick nature, the staggered pick. He's the low side pick, and then Shakir is the top side pick. So there's nothing this defender can do if he goes over the top. It's going to be too far to run, and Cook is going to be open underneath. If he goes underneath, then he's going to get picked off. In this case, he tries to run through it. James Cook, wide open, 17-yard touchdown against man. They're really good at determining the coverage based on pre-snap responses to motion. The Ravens and Zach Orr, if you ask me, have to think about or find ways to be a little more unpredictable with their post-snap coverages based on the pre-snap intel they gave Josh Allen. So this is a jumbo 12 personnel group, and I'll talk about this a little more in the run portion of this video. You got a tight end, and then Anderson, I believe, is the other eligible tight end. Going to be a deep crossers here by Coleman, the rookie, and then I think Hollins from the top side. And notice the Jags defense is horrible. They're really, really bad. Look at the lack of aggression in this defensive end taking on a running back. Think about what other defensive ends, outside linebackers, inside linebackers would do in an equivalent situation faced with a running back that they outweigh by probably 60 to 70 pounds. The Jags defense, I cannot stress it enough, is one of the worst NFL defenses I've seen on film in a long time. Some stuff with Shakir here, mostly going to be on third downs. It's a 3rd and 9 against the Jags last week. Shakir down here to the bottom side. So there's a lot happening here in terms of the concept. You basically get a clear out route. It's an out and up by Keon Coleman up to the top side of the screen. Shakir, with the run after the catch, turns it into a 27-yard touchdown. This is second quarter. The game was pretty much over at this point. But Coleman to the top side is going to run a little out and then up. It acts as a clear out for Shakir to bring his route into that vacated space that Coleman runs through. It's another illustration of man. The only difference is, number one, you have somebody wide open underneath here. They're bringing 5 to try to corral Josh Allen, basically giving up the low hole dropper. In a typical man designation, you would have someone responsible for the middle of the field short and possibly who could go after the quarterback if he tried to escape, and then a middle of the field free safety. Another iteration or version of it, if you will, is that low hole dropper that I drew initially. Bring him as the 5th rusher and let everybody else play man. In this case, Shakir runs onto the open space vacated by that potentially a low hole dropper in the middle of the field. Like I said, he's got 2 touchdowns on the year, 14 for 14 catching, off to a brilliant start. So a little bit earlier in their week 1 game, they're down 17-3 at this point, and this is a 3rd and 6. I think this is a really important play. Well, it's an important play in that game. It's also an important play to recognize the brilliance of Shakir and how he plays off of Josh Allen really well. So Shakir is down here in the slot. Again, it's a 3rd and 6 in the second quarter. They're down 17-3 at home to Arizona already. Zone defense response by Arizona. Shakir initially took his route to the outside, back into the hash, and then when Josh Allen escapes out of here to the left-hand side of the pocket, the downside of our screen, Shakir is expert at finding space. 3 times this year he's found space between the top of the numbers and the left hash. So he's located there a lot. It's generally when the ball is on the right hash. The nickel defender for the Ravens this week has got their hands full dealing with Shakir on, and let me be specific when I say this, on concepts that are created by the Bills' offense and design plays, number one, but also on unsettled or extended plays where Josh Allen gets away from the pass rush. And then Shakir is brilliant at at least so far this year, in a small sample size, 3 games, brilliant at finding space, making himself available, in this case, an important 3rd down late in the second quarter. I think the Bills are able to go down and get a score here to close the deficit. That was an important play, if you ask me, that day, but also throughout the flow of the season. Ball on the right hash, like I mentioned a moment ago. Shakir is the slot receiver to the field, the downside of our screen. 3rd and 5. We've got a tie game here early in the second quarter. I would say this is another situation where Shakir can find the open space. I'm going to go to the end zone angle. My apologies, I guess I didn't include the end zone angle. But I'll pause it so you can get a sense of where he's sitting down. And then Josh Allen's ability to be looking to one side first. Again, it's a 3rd and 5. And then come back to Shakir here. If I had the end zone angle, you could prove it to you that he looked to the right, the boundary side first. Came back to Shakir on the left hash where, again, he's had a lot of impact already this year for an 11-yard gain. Great hands, smart receiver, finds open space. Josh Allen clearly trusts him. It's not an anomaly and it's not a fluke. He's a really good football player. One more example here of Josh Allen's trust in Shakir, and I mean late trust. So, again, I didn't include the end zone angle. I'm not sure why. That's Shakir located to the field. This is second quarter, week 2 against the Dolphins. It's a 2nd and 11. You got a zone 2 high defense here by the Dolphins. Josh Allen looks to the boundary side first and then comes back to the middle of the field. Don't ask me why we're playing in the softest version of the NFL that I've ever seen. They called a unnecessary roughness here on Jordan Poyer. But Josh Allen looking to the right initially. Shakir from the field is going to release to the inside of the nickel and then between these 2 safeties. So he's between the triangulated nature of the 2 safeties and the inside linebacker, Mike linebacker, if you will, who's between the hashes. Josh Allen comes back, rockets the throw in there. I just see a guy trying to make a play who's a split second late. I don't know why these things are being legislated so much in the NFL at this point. But I digress. Look, it's a great throw by Josh Allen, a great catch by Shakir, finding space. The larger point here is Josh Allen will find him as the third read. And increasingly in the film that I watch across the NFL, that is rare, meaning so many quarterbacks have these things schemed up or created for them such that it's their first read or maybe their second. Shakir and Josh Allen's relationship does not flow from that same dynamic. He makes a lot of reads, he being Josh Allen, where he comes back to Shakir as the third read, and you're still talking about 14 catches through 3 games. I think that's a significant point. I don't know if other people have mentioned it. You guys give me some feedback on that in the comment section. I want to expand on that point a little bit. We are talking about only 3 games of information, number one. Number two, I really have only gathered about 60% of their offensive plays, but Josh Allen shares the football among a number of guys, even on these third downs. These are all third down plays here from the first 3 weeks. It's a 3rd and 3 in the first quarter. They're already up 6-0 against the Jags. I do think there's an element of creative plays or design plays, I should say, that the Bills use often. But I think the larger point that I want to try to make at least is his willingness to throw the football to a lot of guys, to share the football around. I'm not trying to make a statement about Stephon Diggs, but when you watch the film and then you go look at the stats, everything lines up with him being willing to throw the football to a lot of guys. In fact, in this case, what I think is probably the 3rd-string running back, Ty Johnson, who's actually a Maryland resident. He's from Fort Hill High School. This is a 3rd and 5 against the Jags, first quarter. And Josh Allen comes all the way back to the left-hand side of the field. Probably gets to his 3rd or maybe even 4th read. I didn't include the end zone angle on this one again. Looked here initially. I think that was just a fake look to kind of hold defenders. So he's come back to this portion of the read here. So let's call that 1 and 2. Pump fakes over the middle or to the left-hand side up the seam, I think to Knox, and then comes back to Ty Johnson. It's a short gain, 4 yards on a 3rd and 5, so inconsequential. But the point I'm trying to make is he's going through the progressions, and he's throwing the ball to a lot of different guys. The Ravens' pass defense will have to be way better than it has been in the last 2 weeks, but first 3 weeks overall, including the Week 1 loss to the Chiefs. This is a 3rd and 6 against the Jags. I would caution you, despite I want you to listen to what I'm saying. Having said that, it cannot be overstated how terrible this Jags defense is. So it's Kincaid for the touchdown, running the back of the end zone. It's a brilliant play by Josh Allen, running to his right, releasing the football somewhere around in that area. But watch the lack of hustle and lack of GAF in the Jags defense at all. It's real when you watch the film. This is a team that if there aren't staff changes at some point in this season and things continue like this, then the Jacksonville franchise just doesn't give a shit. End zone angle, same play, like I said, 3rd and 6. That same drive. First quarter up 6-0. You don't really see Devin Lloyd just lollygagging, but what you do see is Trayvon Walker locked up right by the right tackle after a really lazy move, if you ask me. The Jags defense looks like they have given up already, and this is only first quarter film from last week. Really nice play by Josh Allen here to Cook, who we're going to have to shut down. I guess the other way to look at it is say, do you want to seed the run in lieu of defending the pass better? Well, that's what happens in the second half. So what's the explanation for when a team becomes one-dimensional, when we're up by 2 scores or more, and we still can't stop the pass? So I don't necessarily know. But in any case, Josh Allen breaks a tackle here. Maybe there's a face mask. Cook releases to the middle of the field, short, sitting between the hash. It's a 3rd and 11 against Arizona. Plays with incredible effort compared with Jacksonville in terms of their physicality, their willingness to hit people. I mean, view the hit here against Josh Allen, who's a quarterback. After he releases the football, the differential in the Week 1 defense, the quality of the Week 1 defense that the Bills played versus the other two. I think the Ravens clearly err more on the side of Arizona from a standpoint of athleticism, speed, willingness to at least try to be physical, particularly against the run. I do want to touch on their run game a little bit, and I'm not trying to present it as if they have a dominant run offense. In fact, I think the Ravens are going to be able to handle it. generally, and we may get into a situation where the Bills go into pass-only mode, which at this point in time, how do you not expect them to have some success when that occurs? But in any case, this is a really cool play. I want to oversimplify things a little bit here. Oftentimes when the ball is on a hash, they run zone to the boundary stuff. And when they do run any gap or power schemes, it's generally to the field. And I don't know why that is, but out of 17 run plays, it pretty much follows that pattern. Do I expect it to persist over the course of a 17-game season? No. I have no idea why the hell NFL offenses do certain things they do. They're operating at a far different level than someone like me can comprehend. I'm just trying to provide you some of the data that I think is interesting. In this case, it's a 12 personnel in week 1. Let me let the tight end get in here. It's a really cool play, man. It almost ends up working like a double ISO. So boundary side tight end, and the second tight end is here. They got Knox and Kincaid. And from the standpoint of how they block it, the tackle bases out on the defensive end. Down block, obviously, on the place ID tackle. This right tackle is going to wrap all the way around and release to the second level. That's not the unique part. Tackle log is often seen at many levels, but this tight end is going to Jill ISO and also release up to the second level. Now, perhaps that drawing doesn't help things. If so, let me know in the comments section, but I'll pause it so you can see what I mean. It basically ends up working like a double ISO, where the tight end to the field has released up to the second level. The tackle is pulling, and he's looking for work as well. It goes down to as a 9-yard gain to Cook. What's the takeaway here? You cannot give them this huge ass bubble to deal with here. Now also look at the gap in pre-snap alignment between the left guard and left tackle. That doesn't occur on every single snap. It doesn't only occur on this play, however, and in fact it occurs on some pass plays. I just thought it was a cool play, really well designed. Can't run it at every level because every high school or youth football team doesn't have a right tackle who can pull from the other side of the field and insert into the B gap in time. But boundary side zone runs oftentimes follow motion. In this case, you've got motion from left to right, and then Cook running behind the motion. That is a consistent theme that you'll see. Don't ask me how Arizona thinks they're going to get away with this 5-1. I just watched the Detroit Lions gash them in week 3 with the run against this 5-1 look. Yeah, you got safeties you can walk up into the box. Those guys aren't run fitters from the standpoint of an inside linebacker. At some point, you got to admit that it's great against the pass. It's not great against the run, unless you've got an Aaron Donald, a 3-technique D tackle who's just a badass. It's a 15-yard run on a quite simple boundary side inside zone concept. Yes, you're running the receiver across the field to try to pull guys out of there. If the Mike linebacker, the solo Mike linebacker, can't get there, if he's wrong, there's no one else in support at all. In this case, you've got Budda Baker trying to deal with the left tackle, and it's just a mismatch. Another example of a boundary side zone concept, shorter gain, if you will, but it's 12 personnel, inside zone to the field. Cook is able to get 5 yards against the same 5-1 look. And in fact, it gets even worse on this one because you've got the field side defensive end, or outside linebacker, I should say, all the way lined up outside there of the 2 tight ends. There's just, he can't do a damn thing out there in terms of getting involved in the play. The only guy who can help at all is the backside safety, Budda Baker, if he's playing like a bat out of hell through that backside gap. And in this case, he does kind of impede Cook and get involved in the tackle along with Kazir White, the inside linebacker, or the solo Mike backer. Same game against Arizona, ball on the left hash, zone again to the boundary. In this case, Cook shows his cut ability and agility, bringing it back underneath of those blocks for 9 yards. I just offered these plays to you on particular hashes to kind of illustrate my point. A lot of zone into the boundary from under center with Josh Allen booting off of it. So if you as a Ravens fan or even a Bills fan, if you watch this far, want to maybe add or enhance your enjoyment of the game, when you see the ball on either hash and Josh Allen's under center, oftentimes you're going to get zone to the boundary from a run standpoint with the complementary boot action to the field. One more time, 2nd and 1, week 1 against Arizona. Then we'll get to some Jacksonville film. Little designed cutback by Cook. I think there's actually a penalty here. I think they could have called 2 holds on this one, but it gives you an idea of the vision of Cook, number one. You do get an eligible sixth offensive lineman here. So you'll see that often, about 10, 12 times per game. Pretty obvious the hold on Torrance. I thought you had another hold on the guy. I believe it was 76. Let's get to some run plays against Jacksonville so you can see the difference in quality of pursuit, effort, block destruction, anything. Something looks wrong there in Jacksonville to me. So this is an outside run concept to the boundary, behind motion. Same thing I mentioned on the first play that I showed you. Cook is just bouncing it, and you got just no effort at all up here by, I think, Devin Lloyd. Josh Allen trying to get to the football. Other than that, at the second level, nothing is there at all. Perhaps you have a hold on the boundary side receiver. Ends up being a 6-yard touchdown. Same play, end zone angle. I'll show it to you. You got bunch or 3 receivers to the field. So that makes sense for Jacksonville to be, quote, lined up off of that. No one at the second level at all able to set an edge. I don't see how you couldn't score 40 points on the Jags defense. Ball on the right hash here. You are getting a zone run to the field by Cook. 13 yards. Look at the push that's occurring by their offensive line. Not saying that they're not going to be able to run the ball successfully against the Ravens at times, but they're just moving people, and Cook isn't having to do a thing, really, until he gets to the line of scrimmage. Really embarrassed the Jags defensive line, if you ask me, last week. Same play, end zone angle. Again, ball on the left hash. It's 12 personnel ace. So you have one tight end to the right, one tight end to the left in terms of their perspective from the offense. You got everybody blocked up clean. Cook looks good. We have to make sure that we control and or stop the run game completely. Eligible offensive lineman, again, as the outside tight end. I think that's a real big indicator that it's a run play, meaning they're not going to leave him to the outside and have him run a pass route. Obviously, if it is, it's just something inconsequential into the flats. A down concept. Nice play by 51. I think it's Miller. One of the few times I saw the Jags make any tackle of consequence. Ends up being a 6-yard gain off tackle. The front side inside linebacker, Muma. Not sure what he's trying to fill there. End zone angle, same place, so you can see what I'm talking about. Cook is going to go on this path. Everything for you. You've got a 3 technique, 7, 9, whatever you want to call it. They're going to down block him with the outside 6th offensive lineman. Muma fills inside. So if you're going to do this, then 51 has to fast flow it. You have to basically exchange it with the frontside inside linebacker, and the second guy needs to fast flow it. He's a little bit too slow in getting there, going over the top. It is a nice tackle against Cook. It is a dangerous run game. I like what they do in the run game, to be honest with you. Do I think that they're going to be able to run the football consistently against the Ravens with the way the Ravens have played defense this year? No, I would not predict that for you. Having said that, this is a more balanced offense than we've gotten the last 2 weeks, functionally, in terms of the plays that are called, number one, and number two, from a talent standpoint. No communication or effort at all here by Jacksonville. You've got the X receiver picking Lloyd, Cook running out into the flats, backside just basically snag flat, except it's a pick route by the X, and this is easy for Josh Allen to be able to handle. The Ravens defense will provide a significant amount of more effort, resistance, tenacity, better tackling than what you saw in Jacksonville. I almost, watching that game and watching that film, wanted to totally omit the Jaguars film, but credit to the Bills for some of the design of some of their plays, number one. Number two, how efficient they were. And from an efficiency standpoint, I think Josh Allen has 7 touchdowns, no interceptions, so they all count. Jacksonville's defense, for my money, in the games that I've watched in the last 3 or 4 years, probably the worst defense that I've seen at the NFL level from an effort standpoint, from a pre-snap communication standpoint. Nobody's saying a word. And then from a pursuit standpoint, once the ball is snapped. Having said that, the Ravens have their hands full, in my opinion, trying to navigate the designed plays that will be there for the Bills, defend their collection of receivers and tight ends. I like Kincaid and Knox. Knox has been there a long time. He made plays against the Ravens I think it's 2019 and 2020, the playoff game in 2020 that Baltimore went up there and lost, I think 17-3. Kincaid, the guy they drafted a couple of years ago, Coleman, Hollins, and then obviously Shakir as the guy who at this point in time is leading the charge. Let me know what you think in the comment section of the preview that I gave. I like to try to just give intel to Ravens fans and or review another team's offense. I can't review every single possession and or type of run or pass concept, but this is my preview, my first preview for the Ravens hosting the Bills, focusing on the Bills offense. And then finally, when the wild card or the hammer that the Bills have at the end of each play, if things break down, in Josh Allen, who can scramble and create yards with his legs, but also find space to guys like Shakir and Cook, if he's able to get outside of the pocket, makes, if you ask me, makes this an even more difficult game to play 4 quarters of defense against than the previous 2, against the Raiders and the Cowboys. And we saw how they turned out in the second half. I think Zach Orr this week had to have done some real self-reflection, and he seems like an incredibly humble guy. So I would expect that he's done so. From the standpoint of being prepared for the Bills offense to put us in the best look from play 1. And here's what I mean. I think we have to get stops early. Whatever the Ravens need to do to be prepared for the first 2 or 3 possessions, we have to get stops early. Now, that sounds like the same formula that didn't work against the Raiders because we lost, and then almost caused another collapse against the Cowboys. We have to get stops early. We can't be down 7-0 or 10-0 with our propensity to be incapable or unable, at least, to defend people in the second half. I think the Ravens will play a better quality of defense in the fourth quarter, in the second half. I think Zach Orr is a professional, humble, and very capable person, coach, man, from everything that I've heard of him or ever observed from his playing career and then as a coach. But I do also suspect that our defense won't be as dominant in the first half as we were against the Raiders and the Cowboys. Hopefully it's just a more balanced performance overall from our defense that results in a win. You guys let me know what you think of my preview in the comment section, the plays that I use to try to give you information or intel about the Bills offense, the personnel and the schemes that they use at various times. If you think that other Ravens fans or Bills fans, for that matter, would enjoy this preview of the Week 4 matchup on Sunday Night Football, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.